Hello and welcome to Clone Brewing, the YouTube channel where we homebrew clone recipes of major commercial beers. On episode 1, we'll be brewing a post-modern classic, Brewdog's Punk IPA. We'll look at the recipe, we'll have footage from the brew day, and we'll be doing a taste comparison between the clone beer and the real thing. The excellent thing about Brewdog is that they're very generous with sharing their recipes. They've even published them all in one book, DIY Dog. I'll provide the link to that in the video description. To help with the overall brew day experience, I'm using Brewfather software to input the recipe, work out my water additions, and to track fermentation progress. To begin, let's take a look at the Punk IPA recipe as it's published in DIY Dog. This beer was first brewed in October 2010. It has an ABV of 5.6%, an IBU of 40, and an expected original gravity of 1.053. With a 20-litre batch, we're expecting a final gravity of 1.011. The recipe calls for 4.38 kilograms of extra pale ale malt and 250 grams of cara malt. For hops, there are additions of Chinook, Athenium, Simcoe, Nelson Sauvin, Cascade, and Amarillo. It also suggests using Yeast 1056 American Ale and suggests a mash temperature of 66 degrees for 75 minutes and a fermentation profile of 19 degrees. Finally, for the dry hopping of this beer, Brewdog suggests dry hopping after fermentation is complete for a total of 5 days. Now let's move over to Brewfather, where I've input the ingredients. Firstly, as this is a 20-litre batch, I need to make sure that I've scaled the recipe for 20 litres. We're also looking for a boil time of 60 minutes. For the extra pale malt, I've gone with Crisp Clear Choice Extra Pale, and I've also used Crisp's Cara Malt as well. Using the exact amounts that Brewdog have suggested, you will notice that this gives me an ABV of 5.8% on Brewfather's calculations. This is higher than the 5.6% suggested in Brewdog's recipe. You'll also notice that the predicted original gravity is 1.054, just slightly above what's predicted in the recipe, and also that the predicted final gravity is 1.010, which is again slightly below what's predicted in the Brewdog recipe. Finally, you'll see that the EBC from the malts I'm using is giving me an EBC of 8.3 as opposed to the 15 predicted by Brewdog, and after inputting the hop volumes, I'm getting a whopping 86 IBUs in contrast to the 40 IBUs suggested in the recipe. There are a couple of possible reasons for the discrepancies between Brewdog's recipe and the outputs from Brewfather. Firstly, different pale malts and cara malts have different EBC values depending on the supplier, so the malts I'm using are very likely to be different to the ones that Brewdog used. And then secondly, the alpha ratings of the hops that I've used may be higher than the alpha ratings of the hops that Brewdog use. That being said, a jump of 46 extra IBUs is pretty extreme. If anyone has another explanation for this, please do post it in the comments section of this video. For the yeast, we're going to go with 1 packet of the suggested Yeast 1056 American Ale. And for the water profile, I'm going to be using reverse osmosis water and aiming for a hoppy beer profile as calculated by Brewfather. By pressing the auto button, Brewfather calculates what should go into both my sparge water and my mash water. So what they've suggested is 1.55 grams of calcium chloride, 2.9 grams of Epsom salt, and 5.7 grams of gypsum all into the mash, and then exactly the same volumes going into the sparge water as well. Brewfather is also predicting that I need 16 litres of mash water and 12.58 litres of sparge water. Now with all the planning done, it's time to get brewing.
Okay, first things first, we have the Yeast 1056 American Ale. This is the Smack Pack. Personally, I absolutely hate these packs because they're a pain in the ass to actually smack properly, but I'm going to give it a go. It recommends that you do this at least 3 hours before you're going to pitch. Absolutely no idea if that's worked or not. Okay, so next up is the hops. There's going to be about 8 different hop additions in this one. And finally we are done. So what have we got? We have Chinook 20 Gs at 60 minutes. We have Chinook 20 Gs at 30 minutes. We have Chinook 27.5 Gs at the hop stand. Then we have Athenium 12.5 Gs at 60 minutes, Athenium 12.5 at 30 minutes, and Athenium 12.5 in the hop stand. And then also in the hop stand as well, we have Nelson Sauvin 12.5 grams, and we have Simcoe 12.5 grams in the hop stand as well. So there is a lot of hops going into the boil in this beer, and to be quite honest, it was a pain in the ass weighing all that out. Okay, so while we were in weighing out the hops, I've been heating the mash water up to the strike temperature of 71 degrees. So the next step is to add our brewing salts in. So I'm going to weigh these out now on this digital scales. You will need a kind of a scales that goes in decimal points to add out the exact numbers, but I'll do that now and then we'll take the next step from there. We've reached the target temperature of 71 degrees, strike temperature, so now we're going to start the mash in. I have a feeling that this grain crush is slightly too fine, so I think I'm going to add some rice hulls in there as well. But we'll give it a go. What I normally do is just use a small kind of 1 litre jug and add bit by bit, and then each 1 or 2 litres that I add of crushed grain, I'll give that a stir in as well. So just spread that as evenly as possible, and then use your mash paddle to just stir that in. Make sure you have no dough balls in your mash. Right, so we're all mashed in now. I've given that a good stir. So the next step is to fix the top plate. So place it in at an angle, get it to sit down. So you push that down just to sit up, just above the grain. Take off that pipe, and then I'm going to add this overflow inlet on top of the thing. That's to stop grains going down the overflow pipe. Just fit that on there, push it down, and then add the lid, and we're good to go. Okay, reattach the lid. We're at 67 degrees at the moment. It's the mash is supposed to be 66, but I'm gonna get going. Set it for an hour. So we reattach the circulation pipe here, and I'll just open that up so you can see. Then we're going to set the timer for an hour. Actually, this, I tell a lie, 75 minutes this mash is for. I'm going to start the pump, and off we go. So that's more or less it. Barring any catastrophe now, I'm going to just leave this for 75 minutes mashing at 66 degrees, and then we will work on the next steps. One thing I nearly forgot to do is just take a little sample off this for to check the mash pH. So should be. So let that cool down now and try get it down to around about 20 degrees and then sample the mash pH. Oh, the joys of brewing in Ireland. A few minutes ago it was a lovely sunny day, and now those things are hailstones in April. Okay, so with the sound of hailstones banging off the roof, just testing the mash pH, and it's come in at 5.32, which, I don't know, seems like a reasonable mash pH, so happy enough with that. The mash is coming along nicely. We have about 40 minutes left. I'll just open up that lid so you can see what it looks like, how she's flowing. Nice colour to that, actually. It's starting to clear up a bit. I don't know if you can see that. So, very last minute change of plan here. So the original Brewdog recipe said this should be a 75-minute mash at 66 degrees. So we're at just about 60 minutes now. And I've decided to add in a mash out temperature into this, or mash out step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually raise the temp up to 76 degrees, and once we hit that I'm going to hold it for 10 minutes. I'm going to raise that up now to 76 degrees. We've 15 minutes left of the 75, so I'm hoping it'll take about 5 minutes to get up to 76 degrees, and then we'll hold it there for 10 minutes for mash out before we start the sparge. So while I'm waiting for that to get up to mash out temperature, Peggy wants to play a game of fetch, so we'll have to. Okay, so that is the end of the mash out. I'm just going to put the pump off there, disconnect the recirculation arm, and lift the grain basket, get ready for the sparge. I have to say I'm quite happy with how the brew day has gone so far. No major incidents, nothing has gone wrong really, and wasn't quite the stuck sparge or stuck mash that I was expecting. Probably no need for those rice hulls, so the setting I have on my grain mill is probably the correct one. So we're at 76 degrees now. I'm going to remove the grains from here and let it drain back into the main kettle, and then we're going to start the sparge. So lift that up. The clarity of this beer is really amazing. I'm really impressed with this. So I'm going to start the sparge straight away. I think we're going with 12 litres of sparge water, or 12.6 I think it is. I just need to check that. But the way I'm going to do that is I'll use a 1 litre jug, and I'll do it 1 litre at a time. I suppose I should have said one of the dangers of not using the automated system with the Grainfather, you sometimes forget the next step. So what I should have done there before I started the sparge is raise the temperature up to about 98 degrees. So we're not looking to get exactly to the boil just yet, but what's draining down into the boil kettle here, we're trying to get it up as close as possible to the boil. So when I'm finished the sparge, it's the automatic next step to go into the boil. So that's the sparge finished. So I'm just waiting for everything to drain through now. Put 12.6 litres of sparge water through there. So yeah, I'll just wait for that all to flow through. We should reach a total boil volume of about 24.8 litres. So that's what I'll be looking for. So I'm fairly confident that we've got the required 24.88 litres out of this. So I'm going to take out the grain basket, dump it into the bucket here, and I think we're at about 93 degrees now. So a few more minutes before we get up to the boil. I'm going to ramp that up to 100. I had previously set it to 98. So we'll just lift that out, and actually dump the grain into this bucket with a black bag already in here. There. Now, what I would normally do now is, whilst I'm waiting for that to get up to temperature, I'll just clean this grain basket. We've reached boil temperature, so I'm just going to click set on that. I'm going to set the timer for 60 minutes. And we are good to go. Just going to give that a quick little stir, and then I'm going to add our first hop additions. So we have, at the 60 minutes, we've 20 grams of Chinook. So I'm going to just throw those right in. And we also have 12.5 grams of Athenium, and these are leaf hops as opposed to pellets. I couldn't get them in pellets, so I've got to add the full leaf in here as well, which should be an interesting experience because I've never done it before. So I'm just going to stir those in. The aroma from that is lovely, absolutely beautiful. So just before we got to boil, I took a sample of the wort to test the pre-boil gravity. So I'm going to do that now with my refractometer. So just put a little bit of that on there. It should be, according to the estimations on Brewfather, I should be coming in at 1.048 pre-boil gravity. So according to this, I fucking smashed the numbers, because this is looking like it's around 1.054 pre-boil gravity, which means I'm well above where I should be. So it's time for the 30-minute hop additions, and again we have 20 grams of Chinook. That's in pellet form. In they go. And then we also have 12.5 grams of Athenium leaves again. So in they go, straight in. And again, I just give those a little bit of a stir in to make sure they're well mixed in. Again, absolutely beautiful aroma coming off this beer. The only thing I'm worried about with this beer now, obviously I've kind of gone above the numbers I was supposed to go above, so I've more or less hit my post-boil gravity pre-boil, so 1.054 was supposed to be the post-boil gravity. So there's a potential for this beer to finish at a higher alcohol level than 5.8%, which was predicted when I put it into the software. But we'll see how it goes. But obviously that's going to end up slightly different in terms of end product to Brewdog's Punk IPA. 15 minutes to go, added the Whirlpool tablet. There's 5 minutes to go in the boil now, so what I'm doing is I've connected the counterflow chiller. I'm running the hot water through it in order to sterilise it, because in a few minutes, obviously after the Whirlpool, we're going to be running cooled water through this, and we need it to be sterilised. So the last 5 minutes going to run that boiling water through it. You'll hear that beeping in a moment, and then I'll take off. Okay, so set. I'm going to turn off the heat, turn off the pump also, and then I'm going to remove this counterflow water chiller, and then we're going to add in those final hops there and do a Whirlpool. So we have 12.5 grams of Athenium. We have 12.5 grams of Simcoe. We have 27.5 grams of Chinook pellets, and again in they go. And then finally we have Nelson Sauvin, 12.5 grams, and in they go for the hop stand. So give those a bit of a stir in before we Whirlpool. So just let them sit for a couple of minutes. So essentially they were your flame out hops as per the recipe from Brewdog. They don't really give much information in the recipe about whether this should be a hop stand or a Whirlpool edition, they just say end in terms of they should go in at the end of the boil, so that's why I'm adding them in now. I've turned off the heat, we're at 99 degrees, so I'm just going to give them a stir in. To do the Whirlpool, I have the drill again, but this Whirlpool paddle is the Grainfather Whirlpool paddle, so I'm going to use this for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm just going to let the wort settle for about 10 to 15 minutes, so it'll hopefully form into a nice cone at the end of the kettle, and I can easily transfer the wort then. So I have left it for about 15 minutes. I've reattached the counterflow chiller, which I'm now going to run outside here and connect to the hoses I have outside. So the blue is for the cold water to come in, so I'm going to connect that to my hose outside. Now what we're looking to do is connect our temperature gauge to our water meter on the counterflow chiller, so we'll know what temperature the water is transferred into the fermenter. So this is going to sit on top of the fermenter there, and we're going to leave it sitting at the top so it's splashing in and creating a bit of oxygen. Start the pump. There we go. So you can probably hear that splashing into the fermenter now. The temperature gauge is shown here as it's dropping really quickly. It's at 24, 23, 22. We ideally want it to be going in around about 19 or 20, because that's the rate we're going to be pitching at. So it's at 21 degrees now, which is not bad. It's at 20 now. It's kind of a fine balancing act. You need to kind of play around with this. If it's too hot, you want to kind of play with the tap here and just kind of slow the flow down a little bit, or increase the water pressure that you're pumping into it as well, just to find the right balance there and get the right flow. What I'll do in a moment as well is I'll throw in my tilt hydrometer just to get a reading from it. But what I also want to do is get a sample here so I can see what my post-boil gravity is. I'm just going to take that here. Okay, so the post-boil gravity looks like it's come in at 1.056, which kind of implies that my refractometer was slightly off earlier on, where it gave me a pre-boil gravity of 1.054. Okay, so I've removed the counterflow chiller. That's just out there. Let's have a look. What's left in here. Whoa. That's a lot of hop left in there. Yeah, it's understandable that we're not getting much more through that. So I just put that lid aside now. If we have a little peek into the fermenter, we can see that we're more or less, the top of that cake is sitting at around 20 litres. I'd say it's around about 9.5. That kind of foam on top is kind of bumping it up a little bit to 20. So overall, everything looks good. What I'm going to do is sanitize the yeast packet, which you can see obviously has grown. So obviously my smacking worked earlier on. It's all bubbled out there, so it looks like the yeast has been activated. What's other interesting thing as well, I've put a tilt hydrometer. So the one on the right hand side there is showing as 1.058, the tilt hydrometer. I don't know whether you can see that. There you go, it's focused now. 1.058. So I went back and checked the physical hydrometer, and it actually looks like it's coming in around about 1.058 to 1.060. So maybe when I originally tried that, when it came out of the kettle, it was probably a little bit too hot, and it's cooled down now to 20 degrees, and it's given me an actual 1.058. So I think the tilt is probably spot on there compared to that there. Okay, so final step now is to pitch the yeast. I've just cut off a corner of the yeast packet. I'll lift the lid there and pour that in. I'm always afraid of the little packet inside. These falling into the wort, but hopefully protected there. So that's all in. All that's left to do now is to seal everything up. I'm going to put a bit of sanitizer in my airlock. So I'll just pop the top off that and pour straight from the bottle here. That should do it. And that's more or less it. It's been a largely stress-free brew day. Everything more or less went to plan. The numbers were off a little bit, but that's okay. We're kind of a little bit more alcohol. We'll never complain about that. So we'll check back in a few days once everything is finished up, and we'll see where we go from there. Right, we're on day 9 of this Brewdog Punk IPA clone brew, and it's time to dry hop. So we started off in an original gravity of 1.058. We finished up at 1.014, just slightly above where we were predicting to end up, but it still gives us a final gravity of 5.8% ABV, which, if you recall, when we looked at the Brewfather calculations, that's what it was calculating that would come out at, 5.8%. So that's where we are. Just a couple of updates on things that have happened over the last week. So on day 7, the fermentation was starting to lag a little bit, so I upped that to from 19 degrees Celsius up to 20 degrees Celsius just to finish it off. It was already about 80% fermented at that stage, so we upped the temperature by 1 degree. And then today on day 9, which for the last couple of days we've been finished out at 1.014. So I've dropped the temperature down to 14 degrees Celsius on this Grainfather conical fermenter. Brewdog do recommend, when dry hopping, to dry hop at what they call cellar temperatures, or 14 degrees. So the next step is to get the hops into a muslin bag. So I have that bag sanitized here. Just going to give that a little bit of a squeeze out. And then I'm going to place that over this jug. And I've already pre-weighed out these hops. So what's going in here, you can see in the jug, is dry hop additions. We have 47.5 grams of Chinook, 37.5 grams of Athenium, 37.5 of Simcoe, 20 grams of Nelson Sauvin, 37.5 of Cascade, and 10 grams of Amarillo. So I'm going to pop these into this sanitized sock, get them all in there. So as you can see, there's a lot of hops in here. So I'm just going to pop off the top of the fermenter and lower these hops in. And then just seal it back up. And that's more or less it now. So the next time I'll be back here is when we will be doing the taste test. The day has finally arrived for the taste test between the Brewdog Punk IPA and the clone recipe. So let me just tell you what's been happening over the past couple of weeks. So I initially said on the video that I would batch prime or bottle condition this beer, but I actually changed tack and batch primed into the keg and left for 2 weeks to naturally carbonate. So it's been carbonating for 2 weeks now. I put it into my kegerator last night to chill, so we're going to do the taste test now. So let's test this out. One thing to note actually is Brewdog have recently changed from a 5.6% Punk IPA, and they've reduced the ABV on their Punk IPAs down to 5.4%. I think that's happened in the last couple of months or so. Okay, so first impressions. Obviously slightly bigger head on, I'm going to put that can there so I remember which one is which. Slightly bigger, frothier head on the actual Brewdog Punk IPA. Slightly less head on my clone version. Could be something to do with the way I poured that can, however. In terms of colour or appearance, both seem to be more or less exactly the same, I would say. That kind of light straw golden colour. Okay, let's kind of dig in. So, in terms of aroma, there's a strong, what would be called tropical aroma off a Punk IPA. How does the clone version stack up? I'd say quite similar, to be quite honest. Probably a little bit more subdued in the clone one, but quite similar in terms of overall aroma. Yeah, definitely similar here. Okay, so let's give this one a test. Yeah, that tropical grapefruit, pineapple type flavour definitely comes through. Kind of very prominent in the Punk IPA. Okay, so you see, my clone one has lost a lot of its head, so definitely not holding a head like the original. But let's give it a taste. I'm actually surprised how similar they are. Definitely more flavour coming through from the Punk IPA as opposed to the clone, but they're very, very similar. I think a lot of people wouldn't be able to tell the difference between these two beers. Yeah, definitely huge similarities between the two. In terms of preference, which one would I prefer? I think at a push I would say still the Brewdog Punk IPA. I think it has that slight little bit more aroma, slightly better flavour coming through, but that's not to take away from the clone version. The clone version is still a really, really good beer. It is has very, very similar flavour aroma and very similar flavour to taste. So really, really nice beer as well. So I've a full keg of this beer and I can't wait to get through it. Slightly fuller body as well with the genuine Punk IPA compared to the clone version. The clone version is a little bit lighter in body, but like I said, overall very, very similar beers in appearance, very, very similar in aroma and taste. Just this one packs a little bit more punch than its clone version, but overall I'm really happy with this. I think it's gone really well and I'll definitely be brewing this beer again, so really enjoyed it. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you had, please like and subscribe to the channel for more great videos coming your way very soon.